So the fact that women continue to have difficulties to make it to the higher positions in their respective organizations. And I'll say a bit more on that later. And the last factor I would like to mention concerning the reasons behind the pay gap is part-time work. In Europe, we still have a very large gender gap concerning part-time work, with about over 30% of women in Europe working part-time, against about 8% of men working part-time. So the differences you see in these, on this map here reflect the various reasons behind the pay gap. You see here an area, Germany, Austria, where the pay gap is relatively high. This is mainly because of part-time work that is very dominant in these countries. You see also that the Nordic countries that are usually very good pupils when it comes to gender equality. When it comes to the gender pay gap, they are maybe not that much of a role model, and this is due to the segregation of their labor markets. And then you have countries like Italy here, Malta, as I said before. There the gender pay gap is very low, and that's because the employment rate of women is low, and women don't get to the labor market, so they are not affected by the gender pay gap. I'll continue with our third strategic priority, which is equality in decision making. And here I just, again, I could have shown you a lot of interesting facts and figures. I just show you here the graph showing you how many women are represented in national parliaments. I think it was also said this morning that in the European Parliament we have about 35% of women, but in the average of the EU, the participation rate, if you want, of women in national parliaments is only a quarter. So it's only 25% of women on average are represented in the national parliaments. And here again you see very large and somehow alarming differences between the member states. And have a quick look at this graph, which is very telling. This is women, that shows you the gender balance on the boards of companies, of large companies that are listed on the stock market. And here you see that a lot of European countries have less than 10% of women on the boards of publicly listed companies. And only a few countries actually get to, oops, sorry. No. Let me see. Only a few countries, like here you see Norway, for example. Norway is of course not a member of the European Union, but Norway, we put it on the graph because Norway enacted very interesting legislation a couple of years ago about quotas, binding quotas for women in publicly listed companies. And you see that Norway probably, because of this law, succeeds in ensuring quite a significant number of women in the boards of these companies. So we need to address these imbalances, and here again we think that there's a strong case, not only for fairness reasons, but also that there's a business case for more gender equality in the companies. There's a business case because, of course, these companies can then take advantage of a larger talent pool from which to recruit. They'll probably understand their clients better. And there's also research showing that there's a relationship between, on the one hand, having women represented on the boards of companies, and on the other, that profits might be higher in these companies, and that also the quality of control these boards exercise is a higher one than in companies where you have no women on the board. So this is something we want to address in a very decisive way in the next strategy. And another thing I mentioned this morning as well, which is really a core priority for Vice President Reding and the new Commission, is the fight against gender-based violence. We've carried out a recent survey of the opinion of European citizens on gender equality. And it was very clear from this survey that a very large majority of Europeans believe that the fight against violence is the top priority, or should be the top priority for the European Union in the field of gender equality. And what we plan to do is to present a comprehensive strategy against gender-based violence next year. We also would like to launch a broad awareness-raising and information campaign on gender-based violence. And we will also cover female genital mutilation and also trafficking against women in this new strategy. I come to the last priority of the roadmap, which is our action in the external field. Okay, I have 2 minutes left. So here I'll be brief. We'll, of course, try to mainstream gender equality, continue to mainstream gender equality in our work with the candidate countries, in the enlargement process, in the framework of our neighborhood policy, and also in development cooperation. I wanted to say a couple of words on Europe 2020. I think I'm a bit short of time now. Europe 2020 is our strategy for economic development for the next 10 years. It's the successor strategy to the Lisbon strategy. It's a strategy for smart, sustainable and inclusive growth in Europe. And it was adopted in the beginning of March of this year, and the Commission, together with the other European institutions, with the European Council, with the European Parliament, is working further on this strategy. And I just wanted to share with you the 5 headline objectives of this strategy, because it says quite a lot, I think, of the way we want to take Europe. So we have the target of 75% of employment rate for both women and men in Europe to be achieved by 2020. We want to invest 3% of our GDP in research and development. We have set quite ambitious climate and energy targets, and we want to reduce the number of early school leavers, and we want to lift 20 million people out of poverty. These are the headline targets of this new strategy. And why I'm showing you this is that we, of course, want our gender equality to be very much complementary to this Europe 2020 strategy. And it's very clear that we will not be able to reach, for example, the 75% employment target if we don't raise significantly the female employment rates in Europe. One last word, just to remind you that we are not the only actors. We, the European Commission, is not the only actor in the field of gender equality. We operate here on subjects and in areas where most of the competences remain with the member states. We try to cooperate with the member states very closely in the framework of some of these groups, the Advisory Committee on Gender Equality, the High-Level Group, of which some members are here today,